My name's Ilara, and I'm 29. I live in Portland, Oregon, a city that feels perpetually washed in soft, gray light, where the scent of rain and pine needles clings to the air like a whispered promise. I'm a graphic designer, a weaver of colors and shapes, finding my rhythm in the quiet hum of my laptop and the endless search for the perfect font. If you had told me, even a year ago, that I would be the central figure in a wedding that would implode so spectacularly, I would have offered you a sad, gentle smile. Life, I've learned, is less a straight line and more a meandering river, with hidden currents that can pull you under when you least expect it. My own river started in a small, clapboard house nestled in the Willamette Valley, just me and my dad. My mother passed away from a sudden illness when I was 7, leaving behind a silence that echoed louder than any sound. I remember the warmth of her hands and the scent of lavender that always followed her, but the memories are like watercolor paintings left out in the rain. The colors have bled, and the edges are no longer sharp. Her absence taught me to be careful with my heart, to hold it close like a fragile bird, terrified that letting it fly would mean losing it forever. My dad, Arthur, became my entire world. He owned a small but thriving brewery supply company, a business built on early mornings, calloused hands, and an unshakable belief in the craft. He was the one who taught me how to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, how to change a tire, and how to look at the world with both wonder and a healthy dose of realism. I saw the worry etched in the lines around his eyes, the quiet weight of raising a daughter alone, but he never let it dim his light. He was my anchor, my constant star. In turn, I felt a deep, unspoken need to make him proud, to be a testament to his unwavering love. Romance was never a priority. In high school and college, while my friends navigated the turbulent waters of crushes and heartbreaks, I found solace in my art and a part-time job at a local bookstore. Love felt like a beautiful, treacherous landscape I wasn't equipped to explore. I imagined a future for myself that was peaceful and solitary, filled with good work, a cozy apartment, and perhaps a cat curled up in a patch of sunlight. But then, on a misty autumn afternoon at a local craft fair, where I was sketching the determined faces of potters and woodworkers, I met Liam. He was 31, a data analyst with kind, intelligent eyes and a smile that seemed to understand the quiet corners of my soul. He wasn't like the other men I'd occasionally met. No brash confidence, no easy lines. He simply approached my bench, admired my sketchbook, and started a conversation about the muted blues and greens of the Oregon landscape. I was guarded at first, my reflexive caution kicking in. But Liam was patient. He didn't push. He started showing up at the coffee shop where I worked on my freelance projects, bringing me a London fog without asking, just because he'd remembered me mentioning it once. He was steady, a calm and gentle presence that slowly, painstakingly, began to dismantle the walls I'd built around my heart. After weeks of polite refusals, I finally said yes to a date. We walked along the waterfront, the lights of the city shimmering on the dark surface of the Willamette River. We drove out to the coast and watched storms roll in, sharing a thermos of hot chocolate and talking for hours. With him, I felt seen. Liam made me believe in the possibility of a shared future, a concept I had long since packed away with my childhood toys. When he proposed one evening at the top of Pittock Mansion, with the entire city spread out below us like a blanket of stars, I was overcome. He knelt on one knee, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke of building a life together, of being my partner in all things. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of joy and fear. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw a future I desperately wanted to believe in. I said yes. My dad's reaction was pure, unadulterated joy. He wrapped me in a bear hug, his eyes shining with tears. "Ellie," he said, using his childhood name for me, "I always hoped you'd find someone who saw the light in you." I teased him for being sentimental, but his approval was a balm to my anxious soul. I was ready for this. I wanted a family, a life with Liam. Still, a seed of apprehension had been planted. Liam's family, the Avrils, lived in Lake Oswego, a wealthy, manicured suburb that felt a world away from my own humble roots. They were, from what Liam had described, a family of high achievers and even higher expectations. His mother, Beatrice, was a prominent charity fundraiser, and his father, Marcus, a senior partner at a prestigious investment firm. I had heard stories of their perfectly curated lives, their immaculate home, their unwavering focus on status and success. I was just a girl from the valley, raised by a man who sold hops and malt for a living. How could I possibly fit into their polished world? Liam assured me they would love me, that his parents were just a little formal. But as we began to plan our wedding, my days a frantic blur of client deadlines and venue tours, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to be tested in a way I was not prepared for. The meeting had been delayed several times due to their busy social calendar, but it was inevitable. And I had a sinking feeling that the welcome wouldn't be nearly as warm as Liam promised. A few weeks before the wedding, the day finally arrived. We drove to Lake Oswego, the trees growing taller and the houses larger with every passing mile. My stomach was a tight knot of nerves. The Averil's home was a stark, modern structure of glass and steel that overlooked the lake, beautiful but intimidatingly sterile. I smoothed down the skirt of my simple, elegant dress, feeling like an imposter. "They're going to love you, Alara," Liam said, squeezing my hand. His smile was meant to be reassuring, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I clutched the bottle of Oregon Pinot Noir I'd brought, my knuckles white. Beatrice Averil opened the door. She was a tall, slender woman in a cream-colored cashmere sweater, a string of perfect pearls at her throat. "Liam, darling," she said, her voice smooth and cool as she embraced her son. Then, her gaze fell on me. Her eyes, a pale, assessing blue, traveled from my shoes to my hair, and I felt as though my entire life was being weighed and found wanting. "You must be Alara," she said, her smile a thin, practiced line. I forced one of my own. "It's so lovely to meet you, Mrs. Averil. Thank you for having us." I held out the wine. She took it from me with two delicate fingers, barely glancing at the label before setting it aside on a console table. The interior of the house was like a modern art gallery, all white walls, polished concrete floors, and minimalist furniture. It was impressive but held none of the warmth or history of my father's home. Marcus, Liam's father, was in the living room, reading a financial report on a tablet. He offered a curt nod in our direction before Beatrice gestured for us to sit on a low, uncomfortable-looking sofa. "So, Alara," she began, perching on the edge of an armchair, her posture perfect. "Tell us about yourself." "Liam is our only son. Our legacy. We naturally have a vested interest in his choice of partner." The word partner sounded clinical, like a business arrangement. "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm a graphic designer. I grew up in the valley, just me and my dad. And I'm so happy to be joining your family." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Raised by your father alone," she mused, the tone less a question and more a diagnosis. "That must have been formative. Without a mother to provide certain guidance." A hot flush crept up my neck. I wanted to defend my dad, to tell her that he had taught me everything that mattered: kindness, integrity, resilience. But I held my tongue, mindful of being the polite guest. "My dad is an amazing man. I was very lucky." Beatrice's lips thinned into a line of polite dismissal. Marcus finally looked up from his tablet, peering at me over his glasses. "Alara, marrying into this family comes with a certain responsibility. Our name carries weight in this community. Are you prepared to uphold that standard?" I was stunned. They weren't asking about my love for their son, they were interviewing me for a position. "I love Liam," I said, my voice gaining a bit of strength. "Our standard will be to support each other and build a happy life." A small, sharp sound escaped Beatrice's lips, not quite a laugh, but something condescending. "Oh, my dear. A wife's primary role is to elevate her husband. To ensure his path is clear of distractions." The implication was clear: I was a potential distraction. Before I could process the sting of her words, Liam's sister, Chloe, swept into the room. She was the female version of her mother, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her demeanor radiating a cool, corporate confidence. "So, this is the one," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I trust you understand what you're getting into, Alara. Coming from a less traditional background, you might not be familiar with how families like ours operate." My jaw tightened. There it was again, the veiled reference to my upbringing, as if it were a stain on my character. "There's nothing less traditional about a loving home," I said, my voice shaking slightly but clear. "I'm very proud of where I come from." Chloe raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow and exchanged a knowing glance with her mother. "It's simply a matter of optics," she said with a shrug. "A single-parent household doesn't exactly project an image of stability. We're just being protective of Liam's future." Marcus nodded in agreement. "If you are serious about this union, you'll have to demonstrate your commitment. Our family must always come first." I felt the walls of the pristine room closing in on me. I looked at Liam, my heart pleading with him to intervene, to tell his family they were crossing a line. But he just sat there, his gaze fixed on a spot on the floor, offering me another weak, useless squeeze of my hand under the table. A profound sense of loneliness washed over me. I had spent years protecting my own heart, and in one afternoon, I had allowed it to be judged and dissected by strangers. These people didn't see me, the woman their son claimed to love. They saw a liability, a girl from the wrong side of the tracks who threatened their carefully constructed image. The drive back to my apartment was thick with a silence that felt heavier than words. "They didn't mean it that way," Liam finally said, his voice soft. "They're just intense. They want what's best for us." I stared out the window, the familiar gray of the Portland sky blurring through my unshed tears. "They insulted my father, Liam. They insulted me. And you said nothing." He sighed, a sound of weary frustration. "What was I supposed to do, Jenna? Start a fight? They're my parents. This is just how they are. They'll come around." His words didn't soothe me, they chilled me to the bone. I had opened myself up to this man, trusted him to be my safe harbor. Now, I wondered if he was just another part of the storm. I thought of my dad, who had faced the world alone for me, who had never once made me feel like I was anything less than extraordinary. If he could fight so hard for me, why couldn't the man who was about to become my husband? As I lay in bed that night, the city lights painting patterns on my ceiling, a terrifying question echoed in the dark: was I marrying a man, or was I being acquired by a corporation? The weeks following that disastrous introduction felt like wading through murky water. Beatrice's cool, appraising stare and Chloe's casual mention of optics were seared into my memory. A deep, hollow ache had settled in my chest. All my life, I had worked to build a sense of self-worth from the ground up, brick by painful brick. I had earned my degree, built a career I was proud of, and cultivated a life of quiet dignity. But in one afternoon, the Avrils had made me feel like a fraud, like a little girl playing dress-up in a world where she didn't belong. I knew I needed to talk to Liam, to feel the solid ground of our partnership beneath my feet again. One evening, after a particularly draining day of client revisions, I found him on the couch in my small apartment, the Portland skyline a glittering backdrop to our tense silence. "Liam," I began, my voice softer than I intended. "What your family said. About my dad, about me not having a mother to guide me. It's still sitting with me. It hurt." He leaned back, running a hand through his hair, his expression one of weary patience. "I know they were harsh, Ellie. That's their way. They see the world in black and white. It's not personal." My brow furrowed. "How is it not personal? They made it clear they think I'm not good enough for you. And you just sat there and let them." The last words came out on a raw, broken whisper. Liam shifted, reaching for my hand. His touch was warm, but it lacked the familiar comfort I craved. I didn't want to escalate things, he explained. Confronting them just makes them dig in their heels. Trust me, I know how they operate. Once we're married, once you're officially family, they'll soften up. They'll see how wonderful you are. His logic felt like a foreign language. He spoke of strategy and management, as if his parents were a hostile board of directors to be placated. I wanted a partner, not a crisis manager. I need to know you have my back, I said, my gaze searching his for the man I thought I knew. If something like that happens again, I need you to stand with me. To stand for me. He hesitated for a fraction of a second too long before nodding. Yes. Of course. Let's just focus on the wedding, okay? Everything will be fine after that. Fine. The word hung in the air between us, small and inadequate. I didn't want a fine life. I wanted a life built on mutual respect and unwavering support. I wanted the kind of love my dad had shown me, a love that champions, protects, and never, ever asks you to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's world. But I let it go, burying my misgivings under a fresh layer of hope, telling myself that love required compromise. We dove headfirst into the final wedding preparations, the flurry of activity a welcome distraction. We had chosen a beautiful, rustic venue in the wine country south of the city, an old converted barn with soaring ceilings and views of the rolling vineyards. The weekends became a whirlwind of floral arrangements, menu tastings, and seating charts. My dad was my rock through it all, his quiet enthusiasm a stark contrast to the stilted, formal check-in calls from Beatrice. He helped me hand-paint the place cards, his steady hand a comfort next to my trembling one. But with every decision, the weight of the Averill name felt heavier. I found myself second-guessing choices, wondering if the wildflower bouquets were sophisticated enough, if the farm-to-table menu was up to their standards. I was losing myself in the process. Liam was still the man who would leave sweet notes on my bathroom mirror and slow dance with me in the kitchen while we cooked dinner. But a shadow had fallen over us. He became adept at changing the subject whenever I tried to bring up his family, his face closing off. It was as if he believed that if we didn't talk about that horrible afternoon, it would cease to exist. But for me, it was a ghost in the room, a constant, chilling presence. One night, as we sat on the floor of my living room surrounded by stacks of wedding invitations, I tried one last time. Liam, is your family always so transactional? They seem to view everything, including our marriage, as a business deal. He sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of our unspoken conflict. They're old-fashioned, Ilara. They believe in legacy, in building something that lasts. They're worried about appearances. They just want us to be a strong unit, like they are. A bitter laugh almost escaped my lips. A strong unit? Was that what this was? Tearing down your future daughter-in-law, questioning her upbringing, making her feel small and unworthy? If that was their definition of strength, I wanted to be fragile. But I said none of this. I just sealed another envelope, the sharp edge of the paper a small, fitting pain against my thumb. I thought of my dad, of the quiet strength he possessed. He had built his company not for legacy or appearances, but to provide a good life for his daughter. His strength was in his love, his sacrifice, his integrity. If Liam couldn't see the profound difference between that and his parents' brittle, status-obsessed worldview, what hope did we have? As the wedding day drew closer, I felt like I was standing at a crossroads. One path led to a future I had dreamed of, a husband, a family, a life intertwined with another's. The other path was shrouded in mist, unknown and solitary. Part of me, the part that still loved the gentleman who had brought me coffee and listened to my dreams, urged me to keep walking forward. I told myself these were just pre-wedding jitters, a classic case of cold feet. But a deeper, quieter voice whispered that I was walking toward a gilded cage. And I was ignoring the key that was already in my hand. The morning of my wedding arrived cloaked in a soft Oregon drizzle, the kind that mutes the world in shades of silver and green. Our venue, a lovingly restored barn in the heart of wine country, was filled with the scent of damp earth, eucalyptus, and the blush-colored peonies I'd chosen. Standing before the mirror in my simple, lace-bodiced gown, I felt like an actress about to step onto a stage, the role of a lifetime feeling strangely ill-fitting. My dad came into the bridal suite, his familiar flannel shirt replaced by a handsome gray suit. His eyes were glassy. "You look just like your mother, Ellie," he whispered, his voice thick with a love that spanned decades. He gently adjusted my veil, his hands warm and steady. I clung to him, inhaling the familiar scent of sawdust and coffee, trying to absorb his strength. Walking down the aisle on his arm, I saw Liam waiting. His smile was broad, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. We exchanged our vows, the words I had written feeling foreign on my tongue. He promised to be my partner, my defender, my home. For a fleeting moment, as he slid the cool metal of the wedding band onto my finger, I allowed myself to believe him. The small crowd of our closest friends and family erupted in applause, and I let the illusion of perfection wash over me. The reception began with a fragile sense of hope. The barn glowed under strings of fairy lights, the long wooden tables adorned with flowers and candles. I laughed with college friends and shared a dance with my dad, his steps a little clumsy but full of heart. Liam held me close for our first dance, his chin resting on my head. "See," he murmured in my ear. "Everything's perfect." And for a few precious minutes, I almost agreed. But then, I saw them. Beatrice and Marcus, holding court near the open bar, their laughter growing louder and sharper with each glass of champagne. A familiar knot of dread tightened in my stomach. They were getting drunk, and not in a joyful, celebratory way. There was an edge to them, a simmering arrogance that the alcohol was stripping of its polite veneer. As the evening wore on and the toasts began, we lined up at the front of the room, me, Liam, my dad, and the Averills. After the best man and maid of honor had spoken, the MC handed the microphone to me to thank our guests. I took a deep breath, but before I could utter a single word, Beatrice smoothly plucked it from my grasp. Her voice, amplified by the speakers, cut through the cheerful chatter of the room. It was slurred, but laced with steel. "A little announcement for our new daughter-in-law," she trilled, swaying slightly. "Now that you're an Averill, Alara, we have certain expectations. To show your commitment to this family, we'll be requiring you to turn over your monthly income. What is it, dear?" "About $8,000, to the family fund. It's the least you can do to prove you're not just after our name." A stunned silence fell over the room. The air crackled with disbelief. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on me, my face burning with a humiliation so intense it felt physical. I looked at Liam, my expression a silent scream for help. He stood frozen, his face ashen, his lips pressed into a thin, white line. He wouldn't even meet my gaze. Marcus, emboldened by his wife's audacity and the champagne, grabbed the microphone next. "And that dress, Alara," he boomed, a cruel smirk on his face. "Far too simple. You should have consulted Beatrice. You need to learn your place." A few nervous titters rippled through the guests, the sound of shock curdling into a spectator sport. My heart was a wild bird trapped in my ribs. This was my wedding day. These were the people I was supposed to call family. And they were systematically dismantling me in front of everyone I loved. I turned to Liam again, a final, desperate plea in my eyes. He flinched, shoving his hands deep into his tuxedo pockets as if to hide them, as if to hide himself. And in that moment, the last vestiges of my hope shattered. He was never going to choose me. He had already made his choice, long before this day, and it wasn't me. It was them. It was always going to be them. Then, a calm, steady presence moved beside me. My dad. He gently took the microphone from Marcus's hand, his expression unreadable but his eyes blazing with a quiet, protective fire. "That's enough," he said, his voice not loud, but carrying an authority that commanded the room. "You are embarrassing yourselves, and you are humiliating my daughter. Have you no decency?" Beatrice sneered at him. And who are you to lecture us? A small-time supplier from the valley. You have no idea how the world works. The crowd gasped. The pain in my chest was so sharp I could barely breathe. But my dad didn't flinch. He looked directly at Marcus, his voice low and clear. You know, it's funny you mention how the world works, Marcus. I was just having coffee last week with my old college roommate, David Chen. You remember David, right? The lead investor who funded your firm's last major expansion? He was also raised by a single parent, a single mother, in fact. I'm sure he'd be fascinated to hear your views on what constitutes a stable background. The color drained from Marcus's face. Beatrice's smug expression dissolved into one of pure panic. The room was no longer silent, it was buzzing with the sound of smartphones being raised, of videos being recorded. A fierce surge of pride for my father washed through me, but it was followed by the devastating clarity of my own situation. Liam's silence was a confession. It was an admission that his comfort was more important than my dignity. The beautiful dream I had so carefully constructed had crumbled into dust, revealing the ugly, rotten foundation beneath. And in the wreckage, I finally found my voice. The reception hall was a tableau of shock and scandal. Beatrice and Marcus stood frozen, the alcohol-fueled bravado vanishing as the full weight of my father's words landed. Marcus began to stammer, reaching for my dad's arm. Arthur, please. I wasn't thinking. Don't say anything to David. Beatrice clutched her pearls, her eyes darting wildly at the sea of glowing phone screens recording her downfall. But I wasn't looking at them anymore. I was looking at Liam. He finally met my gaze, his eyes filled with a pathetic mixture of panic and regret. But it was too late. The chasm between us was too wide to cross. The pain of his betrayal was a physical thing, a sharp, clean break in my heart. But through that break, a fierce, brilliant light poured in. The light of my own self-worth. I took the microphone from my father's hand. It felt cool and solid, an anchor in the storm. My own hands were trembling, but my voice, when it came, was perfectly steady. Thank you all for being here to celebrate with us, I said, my eyes sweeping across the stunned faces of our guests. But there will be no marriage today. I paused, letting the words settle. I have learned a very important lesson tonight. I learned that love is not about compromising your soul. It's not about shrinking yourself to be accepted. And it is certainly not about standing silently while the person you claim to love is torn apart. I turned my gaze to Liam and then to his parents. I deserve more than this. And you, I said, my voice dropping but losing none of its power, will never have the privilege of defining my worth. A wave of applause, tentative at first, then growing in strength, rippled through the room. I handed the microphone back to the bewildered MC, took my father's hand, and without a single look back, I walked out of that barn and into the cool, cleansing rain of the Oregon night. As we reached the car, my dad pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home. I am so proud of you, Ellie, he said, his voice choked with emotion. And that's when I finally cried. Not tears of heartbreak for the man I had lost, but tears of relief for the woman I had just found. In the days that followed, I methodically dismantled the wedding. I wrote a personal check to every guest who had given us a gift, enclosing a short, sincere note of apology for the disastrous evening. The response was overwhelming. Texts and calls poured in, not with pity, but with respect and admiration. Friends told me I was brave. My colleagues said I dodged a cannonball. Their support was a gentle net, catching me as I fell. The fallout for the Averils was swift and public. Videos from the reception went viral in local circles. Liam's colleagues at his tech firm, many of whom had been guests, treated him like a pariah. I heard through a mutual friend that he quit his job a few weeks later, unable to stand the constant whispers and sideways glances. Marcus's fate was sealed. My dad didn't have to say another word. David Chen saw the videos and, horrified by the blatant disrespect, quietly withdrew his support from Marcus's firm, citing a fundamental misalignment of values. Marcus was marginalized, his career effectively over. Beatrice and Chloe became social outcasts, their carefully curated world of charity balls and country club lunches slamming its doors in their faces. I felt no joy in their ruin, only a quiet sense of karmic balance. They had built their house on a foundation of sand, and it had washed away. Back in the valley, my dad and I fell into a comfortable new rhythm. We spent our evenings on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of peach and lavender, talking about everything and nothing. One evening, as the crickets began their nightly song, he turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Ellie, you've always had a wonderful eye for design. My branding at the supply company is... well, it's dated," he said with a wry smile. "I could use someone with your talent to help me bring it into the future. Maybe one day, you could even run the place." My heart swelled. His company wasn't a global empire, but it was his life's work, built with honesty and sweat. The thought of pouring my creativity into it, of helping his legacy grow, felt like the most meaningful work I could possibly do. "I'd love that, Dad," I said, my voice clear and certain. "I'd love that more than anything." He smiled, a deep, genuine smile that lit up his entire face. "You already make me proud, kid. This is just a bonus." And so, I began a new chapter. I threw myself into learning the business, from the chemistry of hops to the logistics of shipping. It was challenging and invigorating, and with every small success, a redesigned logo, a new client landed, I felt a piece of myself clicking back into place. I wasn't just rebuilding a life, I was consciously and carefully building a new self, one rooted in the values my father had taught me. Looking back, that wedding wasn't an ending. It was a violent, necessary beginning. It could have been the day I signed my soul away to a family who would never value it. Instead, it became the day I claimed it back. I learned that I do not need anyone else's approval to be whole. The love of my father, the strength of my own convictions, that is more than enough. The future is still an open road, stretching out before me under a wide Oregon sky. I don't know where it will lead, but for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to walk it alone. I am the artist of my own life now, and I am finally ready to paint my masterpiece.